Hi, this is Group 2 with the review of the Trotula, a medieval compendium of women's medicine by Monica Green. So the thesis and main ideas. The Trotula is a collection of three treatises on various conditions and treatments concerning the female body. Monica Green provides a detailed summary of the historical and social context of this work, including some questions about its authorship. She also provides a critical facing English and Latin translation of the three treatises on women's health with some shared notes on the female and male health.
The sources are a synthesis of translations. So, from the book, there's a quote that says, "There's no single author and no single text. There is consequently no single or simple story to be told of Chocula or women's medicine at Salerno." We can see this because the translations include conditions of women, which is based on another text, and that becomes Trotula Major. This is written by an anonymous author. Then there's treatments of women, which is attributed to Trotula, and this is an unorganized collection of cures. And finally, on women's cosmetics is written by another anonymous author. While most of the book is translations, the author cites some secondary sources for background. Primarily, these texts are on medieval women's medicine. For example, one of them is women's healthcare and medical practice in medieval Europe, as well as numerous gynecological texts, such as From Diseases of Women to Secrets of Women, the transformation of gynecological literature in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, and I thought a memorable aspect of the book was the fact that social conditions were very motivative in the development and pursuit of women's cosmetology. One quote that Green wrote that really stood out to me was that there are some women who, because of the magnitude of their instrument and its severe odor, are oftentimes found unpleasant and unsuitable for sexual intercourse. Having begun the deed, men leave it unfinished, nor do they approach them, the women, anymore. And while this is a very unfortunate course of events, I think the quote really shows that life was very male focused and male centric in Salerno and that time period. Green also notes that women spent their whole lives under the guardianship of a male. So at first they would be under their father's care and then their husband's care. And then if their husband were to die, they would be under the care of their brothers or adult sons. And this really shows that women are basically entirely beholden to the man in their life. And part of their status is based on really entirely based on who they're married to and who they're with. So obviously, they would need to be attractive in order to achieve that nobility as Salernitan society had an acute consciousness of nobility or aspirations to the noble status. And ultimately, Women's Cosmetics, one of the three books, reflects a strictly empirical side of Salernitan medicine, meaning there was less focus on the theory behind cosmetology, and it was entirely focused on the practice so that women could apply these methods to make themselves more attractive.
An important passage in the book was for all the wealth of the early medieval gynecological corpus, then the new Samaritan writings on women are largely independent of the Latin works preceding them all. Still, it seems likely that the author of Conditions of Woman took the existence of some of these texts and perhaps the rhetoric of at least one of them as a spur to writing his own specialized text about an area of medicine that some were reluctant to speak about openly. This quote in particular was important because the book emphasizes the need to understand medicine in the context of the time it was written and the beliefs at that time. And it has a very long, detailed introduction, which helps the reader to understand that time period. And this passage is a great example of how Green explains medical practices and frames it in the broader knowledge of the time period to facilitate a complete understanding of practices at the time.
I thought there were two primary audiences of the book. The first was students of history, particularly students of medicine history, Greek history, Arab history, or Italian history. Because as Green writes, the task of the history of medicine is to reconstruct an image that the world that they saw, a sensation of the body as they experienced it. So by reading Trotula's work, we can get a glimpse into the really society of the time, and we can see what other cultures and societies were influencing Italian society. I think the second primary audience was students of gender dynamics and women's studies. As Green writes, these Milius, most important, those that structured medieval gender systems, also left their imprint on the texts. So the work gives us insight only into the culture, broadly speaking, but also the culture for women specifically of the time.
So before we get to our recommendation of the book, here's some things we liked and didn't like about it. So overall, as we previously said, it had an engaging introduction that provided enough historical and social and intellectual context for during which the Trotula was written. Also, overall, the translation was easy to read. Obviously, there was emphasis on women's health, and there was such great detail and intricacy that Green was able to preserve. And I find that the preservation of the Latin, even if we can't read Latin quickly or at our native language, it's nice to see English and Latin side by side. It helps us feel closer to the text, even if we're not actively translating. Some things we didn't like, some terms naturally felt unknown or outdated, so maybe some commentary or some elaboration on specific things, not only on the historical context, would have been more helpful. But overall, strong.
We gave the book a thumbs up. We think it provided some really good context in medicine and society at the time. It discussed medieval beliefs and how they evolved with each other, and that framed the treatments that were written about throughout the Trotula. Green structure, beginning with background information and moving on to diseases and treatments, as well as beauty and cosmetic treatments, allowed a full and complete image, which really helped better understanding in relation to everything we're discussing in class on the history of medicine, specifically women.
And then to close our presentation, we want to return to a discussion question that Green herself actually poses. In the introduction, she asks why women's medicine specifically, when referring to the writers of these translations, why did they have this interest in women as opposed to other groups? She hypothesizes that these writers may have coincidentally had access to a large Latin corpus on women's health, but cannot offer a definitive answer. She did not believe that women had a higher social status or a greater literacy in this area. So there must be some unique reason why they chose to pursue women's medicine. After reading the book as a whole, it seems that these writers sympathized with women as they found they faced medical challenges unique to their gender. So they wanted to educate and destigmatize these challenges by talking about them. This comes through in the specific interest in menstruation, pregnancy, and birth. And I just want to leave you with a final quote that seems to emphasize this interest. Therefore, because women are by nature weaker than men, and because they are most frequently afflicted in childbirth, diseases very often abound in them, especially around the organs devoted to the work of nature. Moreover, women, from the condition of their fragility, out of shame and embarrassment, do not dare reveal their anguish over their diseases, which happen in such a private place, to a physician. And that's the end of our review. Thanks for listening.